Hello and welcome to Catholic Answers Live. Holy smokes, I can't believe it's Friday already. I'm happy it is, because Fridays, that's usually when we get to see Jimmy Akin, and that is the case today. And I'm kind of relieved we haven't asked me anything with Jimmy today. You can call and ask him whatever you like, 888-318-7884, because we did a lot of themed shows this week where we said, you're going to have to call back on and ask me anything day. So I imagine with both Jimmy and the backlog, we're going to be very busy today. So 2 lines open right now. Great time to dial. If you have a question for Catholic Answers Senior Apologist Jimmy Akin, 888-318-7884. Jimmy, also the podcaster behind Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World. As a matter of fact, I bet there are just thousands and thousands of people in this world who that's the primary way they know Jimmy. And also the podcaster behind the Jimmy Akin podcast, Jimmy Akin. Happy Friday.
Hello, Psychellid. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. Have you ever thought about that? There's like you do all these things and you've done all these things, but there's a lot of people who just know you as the Mysterious World guy. There probably is anyways.
Oh, yeah, there are. There are people they're different. And I think this is true for, anybody who is a public figure, and certainly anybody who's a public figure that that does more than one thing, is that there are different communities of people who are aware of them. And there's substantial overlap between those communities often, but it's not total overlap. So there are going to be some people who are familiar with me from my writings, but not from any media work I've done. There are going to be other people who are familiar with me from YouTube, but have never heard me on the radio. There are going to be other people who are familiar with me from Catholic Answers Live, people who are familiar with me from Mysterious World, people who are familiar with me from Secrets of Star Trek, and
yeah, you're right.
It's going to just vary.
Well, we're glad you're here, and I know that there are many that know you from Catholic Answers Live. So,
I would be surprised if there weren't a lot of people who knew me from Catholic Answers Live here.
Yeah, that's right. Let's give them some credit since they're here. 888-318-7884, the number. Let me give you an opening question, Jimmy, while we get the calls screened. What did Jesus mean in Matthew chapter 16 when he said, if you lose your life, you will find it?
Okay, so this passage occurs, as you say, in Matthew 16, and it's right after the passage where, Jesus declares Peter the rock on which he's going to build the church and so forth. And then he makes a passion prediction. He predicts that he's going to, that he's going to die. And that's something that Peter takes exception to. And Peter says, "Oh, far be it from you, Lord, may this never happen to you." And then Jesus turns to Peter and says, "Get thee behind me, Satan, you're a hindrance to me, for you're not setting your mind on the things of God, but on the things of man." So this is like Peter's just had this triumphant confession of faith in Jesus that results in this great blessing where he says, "I'm going to build the church on you." And then Peter being Peter, he's got a royal screw up, and Jesus rebukes him. And then Matthew says, then Jesus told his disciples, if anyone would come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. For whoever would save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. And that's what you're asking about. He goes on to say, for what will it profit a man if he gains the whole world and forfeits his soul? Or what will a man give in return for his soul? And he continues on from there. Now, the way Matthew works is Matthew's an organizer. He back in the ancient world, they didn't have, most people weren't even literate, and only a tiny number of people knew how to take dictation. So they didn't have stenographers following them around recording exactly what was said on exactly each occasion. So one of the things that is characteristic of Matthew is he takes things that Jesus said on different occasions and puts them together because they're on similar topics. Like the Sermon on the Mount is a compilation of Jesus' ethical teachings, for example. And we know they weren't all said on one occasion, because if you look, for example, at Luke, Luke's got a lot of the Sermon on the Mount, but it's scattered all over the place. And so either Luke took a perfectly wonderful, organized discourse that is actually highly structured in Matthew and smashed it and scrambled it up, or Matthew took a bunch of sayings that were said on different occasions and put them together in a highly structured, highly organized sermon. And personally, I favor the latter proposal. There's one biblical scholar who entertained the hypothesis that, well, maybe Luke discombobulated the Sermon on the Mount, but concluded if he did that, then he really unscrambled the egg with a vengeance.
Yeah.
Because of how disorganized the material appears in Luke. In any event, we shouldn't assume that Jesus, if you had a video recording of all this, that Jesus literally said all these things right after he rebuked Peter, but because they're on a similar set of themes, he's grouped them here. And you'll notice on the surface level, he's talking about literally losing one's life. He says, if anyone would come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. And well, you die on a cross,
Right.
So when he then follows that with, for whoever would save his life will lose it. Well, that would mean if you don't take up your cross and die on it, then you're going to lose eternal life. Whereas if whoever loses his life, in context, meaning taking up your cross and dying on it, will save it, meaning you'll gain eternal life. So on the surface level, this would mean if you don't die for Christ's sake, at least if you're given the opportunity to die for Christ's sake, like let's say they're going to martyr you if you keep confessing Christ and you decide to stop confessing Christ and, offer sacrifice to the gods or whatever, then you'll be lost eternally. Whereas if you do accept martyrdom, you'll be saved eternally. Now, that's on the surface level. But do you think any Christians have ever maybe read that statement about taking up your cross as not fully literal, but embracing other possibilities besides literally dying on the cross?
Yes, right. That's like a core of the Christian life, basically.
Yeah. And so I think even though on the surface level this principle speaks of losing your life, I think it's broader than that actually in its application, and it would apply to anything where mortal sin comes on the table. So basically it's not just dying on the cross, but also resisting anything that would drive a fundamental wedge between you and God and Christ. And so if you resist temptation, mortal temptation, to the point of death, so you don't commit mortal sin, then you'll be saved. But if you chicken out and give in to, let's say, peer pressure to do something mortally sinful, well, then that's going to jeopardize your eternal life. So I think it's broader than just the loss of physical life, but that's fundamentally what's being talked about here. He's teaching a principle about how you lose or gain eternal life.
Thank you, Jimmy. Thanks very much. And now all the lines full. It's Ask Me Anything. Jimmy Akin, our guest, right back. Go to the phones on Catholic Answers Live.
Catch Catholic Answers Live anytime at Catholic.com.
Homeschool Connections, an online provider of courses for your Catholic homeschool and your homeschool co-op, is a sponsor of Catholic Answers Live. Homeschool Connections website is homeschoolconnections.com.
Are you a coffee drinker? If so, you can now enjoy a coffee roasted to perfection by the Carmelite monks of Wyoming. Delicious Mystic Monk coffee is roasted and prepared by monks in a hidden cloistered monastery and is available in over 25 varieties. All Mystic Monk coffees are works of perfection and labors of love. For more information on how to purchase Mystic Monk coffee, visit mysticmonkcoffee.com. That's mysticmonkcoffee.com.
Join us throughout the month of June for coverage of Pope Leo in Spain, our celebration of Father's Day, and of course, Catholic Radio's premier shows, featuring The Spirit World with Debbie Georgiani and Father Mike Driscoll, EWTN Open Line, Mother Angelica Live Classics, and more. EWTN Radio, your source of truth that allows Catholics to grow in their faith and recognize the true mission of the Catholic Church.
Welcome back. Catholic Answers Live. Jimmy Akin, our guest. I said it's usually Friday is the day we get to see Jimmy, but also Friday is the day a new Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World podcast drops. Hundreds of them have already dropped. I'm going to go more than 400. I don't always get this right, but I think we are, I don't think over 500. I think between 400 and 500. That's my guess right now, Jimmy.
Yeah, 22 more than 400. Today was episode 422.
And what was episode 422? What was the mystery?
The Ark of the Covenant.
Oh, all right.
So
Very good.
what happened to the Ark of the Covenant? That's the big mystery for today.
And at least one answer is it's like Ethiopia or somewhere, right? Isn't there a claim?
That's one of the proposals. I talk about that. I also talk about others. There's actually several different proposals.
Yeah, government warehouse is one, as I recall. But all right, check it out.
There's actually that's a subcase of a different theory. There is one of the theories that's been proposed historically is that the ark was taken to Egypt by Pharaoh. In the Bible, he's called Pharaoh Shishak, but that's the Hebrew pronunciation, or based on the Hebrew pronunciation. In Egyptian records, he's known as Pharaoh Shoshank I. And according to one story, he took it back to Egypt, and that's the one that's endorsed in the film Raiders of the Lost Ark. And so I discussed that. I discussed the Ethiopian theory. I discuss a whole bunch of stuff. But one thing I can assure you is we have top men working on this question.
I am glad to hear it. Top
men.
Very good. Very good. Check it out. Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World, mysterious.fm. But, anywhere you get your podcasts, as we have established before, whether your other podcasts are good podcasts or bad podcasts, wherever you get them, you can get Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World. You can also go to Jimmy Akin's YouTube page to find out all about what Jimmy's up to, including on Mysterious World. All right, to the phones we go. Paul is in New Jersey, where I believe that government warehouse was located. Hi, Paul. You got a question for Jimmy?
Hello there, Mr. Keller, and hello, Mr. Akin. Thank you for having me.
We're happy to have you.
So I thought this was Bible questions, and I didn't realize it was an Ask Me Anything. So is it all right if I tweak my question a little bit?
Well, anything includes Bible questions. So you're welcome to ask a Bible question on Ask Me Anything Day. You're also welcome to ask me weird questions on an Anything Day. You're welcome to ask me anything on an Anything Day.
But the question about the question does not count, though, Jimmy. He still gets a question now. It's not one of those.
Yeah.
All right, go ahead.
Very good. Thank you, gentlemen. So with a little bit of preamble, if we can agree that the word Elohim encompasses heavenly beings, angels and saints, such as in Psalm 82:1 and Samuel, and God says, "You shall have no other gods before me," where gods is the Hebrew word Elohim. And if we can agree that the Hebrew word al-panai, corresponding to before me, can be taken more literally as before my face, can we interpret the first commandment as saying, "You shall have no heavenly beings, angels and saints, before my face"?
Well, you could interpret it that way, but it would be a mistaken interpretation. Would you like a little more detail on why?
Yes, because I was actually trying to have this discussion with a Protestant, and he's saying that praying to saints would be putting Elohim before the face of God. So just trying to see where there's the misunderstanding.
Okay, so the way to approach this is to, like with any biblical text, is to approach the text directly and say, what is this text trying to say to the original audience, not to us, not as it's been elaborated and fleshed out and so forth over the course of the last 3,000 years, but what did it mean to the original audience? What's the core base of its meaning? And then from that core base, we can figure out what are logical extensions that we could infer from it. So, when it says, now al pana does mean to the face or before the face or besides the face, and there's a possessive also, so it's before my face. Psychelet,
Yes.
if God says not to do something before his face, where would God's face be? Where is there a particular privileged location of God's presence
Well, I
that
suppose
the ancient Israelites would have known about and thought of as that's where you go to encounter God?
the temple.
The temple, yeah, or the tabernacle before the temple.
Yeah.
So, if you check out scholarly commentaries, including Jewish ones, they will point this out. And what the base meaning of this is in the original Hebrew understanding of the Ten Commandments is, don't have any other idols in my temple. That's why it then immediately goes on to talk about don't make any idols of these different things. So this is, in its base meaning, a prohibition on having other idols in God's sanctuary. That's where you would go to encounter God's face, is his sanctuary. And so, does it have broader implications than that? Sure, it does. But notice that doesn't eliminate even all statuary from being in God's sanctuary, because right there on the top of the Ark of the Covenant, speaking of the Ark of the Covenant, you got two cherubim with their wings outstretched towards each other. They're actually hammered in and out of the gold that was used to make the capparet, the lid of the Ark of the Covenant. And once the temple was built, Solomon was told, as part of the pattern he needed to follow, to have two giant cherubim standing over the Ark of the Covenant with their wings touching each other. And so there was statuary in the sanctuary. It just wasn't idols. So these two cherubim on the Ark of the Covenant, they're not idols. The two giant cherubim symbolically guarding the Ark of the Covenant in the sanctuary, they're not idols. They're just statues. So you can't infer from the commandment that one is not to have any statuary. Now, what differentiates a statue, even a statue of a sacred creature that can, a holy creature that can in some contexts be called a member of the Elohim, because angels can be called members of the Elohim, just like human souls can. Elohim is a term that has a broad enough range, it can indicate anything in the spirit world. So what differentiates a statue from an idol? Well, the way idols were understood in the ancient Near East, they actually contained the god that they represented. In fact, they had a special ceremony to invest the god into the statue of the god, at which point it became an idol. And so prior to doing this ceremony, It was just a statue. But then, for example, in Egypt, you go to the statue and you symbolically open its mouth by touching its mouth with a special ritual instrument. And at that point, the god comes into the statue and lives in the statue. That's what makes it an actual idol. And so that's what's being forbidden. You don't have any idols here. Okay, now let's look at the other side of the question. We've covered the visible manifestation of gods in the form of their idols. What about invisible manifestations? Well, Psychelit, if the statement "you shall have no other gods before me" means don't put any idols in my sanctuary, can you infer from that you shouldn't worship other gods? Probably.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, probably. I mean, it's not 100% certain. It could just be a ritual requirement of just don't put them in my temple. But given other stuff we know, God really didn't want people worshiping him either. So you can legitimately infer don't worship other gods. And worshiping something doesn't mean respecting it, because you can respect other people. In fact, honor your father and mother is one of the other 10 commandments. So you're obviously expected to respect your father and mother. And broadly, you're also expected to respect whoever is out there that is owed respect. That's a principle that's articulated in the New Testament. Give honor to those to whom honor is due. So that includes governors, it includes angels, it includes all kinds of things. You just don't give it the honor that's due to God himself. But since we know that angels exist and that saints exist and that they're due honor in some form, well, then obviously the don't have idols in my sanctuary command can't be extended so far as to mean don't show due honor to saints and angels. What about asking them to pray alongside you? Well, that's just not even envisioned here. There's nothing in this don't have idols in my sanctuary command that says you can't ask someone here on earth to pray for you. And in fact, that's actually encouraged elsewhere in Scripture. And so if someone just happens to be dead, well, there's no prohibition here saying you can't ask them either. What is legitimately prohibited as an extension of this command is don't give divine worship to anything other than God. But asking someone to pray for you and be your prayer partner in heaven, that's not giving divine worship to someone. So that would be an extended application that is an application too far, that goes beyond what can legitimately be inferred from this passage. So that's what I'd have to say about that.
You know what? And I'm going to...
Very good.
Okay. I was going to say I got to leave it there, Paul, because we do have lots of folks on the line. Thank you very much for the call. I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to send you a copy of Jimmy's newest book, Evidence for Christ, How We Know That Jesus is the Messiah. I'm sending it for two reasons: to say thanks for the call, but also I wanted to say the title so people would know Jimmy has a new book out. So hang on, give us an address, and we'll send you Evidence for Christ, How We Know That Jesus is the Messiah, the new book from Jimmy Akin. All right, off we go to Glen Rose, Texas, where Ryan is listening on the Catholic Answers app. Welcome back, Ryan.
Thanks for taking my call, guys.
Sure, we're happy. We're always happy when you're here. Go ahead.
All right, Jimmy, just to give a quick background, last year in December, I got to witness Ivan, one of the Medjugorje visionaries, speak at the parish I go to.
Mm-hmm.
And I was curious, after the Vatican issued those new norms on the investigating supernatural phenomenon, are the faithful still permitted to have a personal belief in Medjugorje and other unapproved Marian apparitions, or can that still be done?
Well, the norms that the Vatican issued a few years ago don't say anything like the faithful are prohibited from believing in unapproved apparitions. Now, there are some apparitions, specific ones, that have been condemned. And some of those condemnations contain things like this is heretical. And so you obviously shouldn't be believing in something like that. But unless an apparition has been given a specific form of condemnation, then there's no prohibition if you think the evidence supports it in believing it's of supernatural origin. There's a little more to say, so I'll say it on the other side of the break.
Hang on, Ryan. Coming right back. Jimmy Akin is our guest. Catholic Answers Live. Ask him anything. 888-318-7884.
Who was Jesus? It's the most important question in the world. Was he a great teacher? A religious myth? The Messiah and Lord? In Evidence for Christ, apologist Jimmy Akin builds a powerful step-by-step case from history, scripture, and reason, showing that Jesus is the fulfillment of prophecy and the risen Lord. Get your copy of Jimmy Akin's Evidence for Christ today at shop.catholic.com or at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Have you ever wondered about the mysterious, even obscure aspects of the Catholic faith? Dive into the Jimmy Akin podcast, where Jimmy brings together information from many fields as he pushes the boundaries of apologetics. Tune in today to the Jimmy Akin podcast, Mysteries of the Faith, a highly entertaining, informative, and at times humorous show that will help you grow in your faith. Visit JimmyAkinPodcast.com today to subscribe.
Feeling stuck? Feeling like you're not sure what's next? Well, you can be sure of this. God is not finished with you yet. In his new book, Not Finished Yet, Dr. Marcus Peter shares a powerful message of hope, healing, and transformation in Jesus Christ. Read it to discover how to overcome struggles, embrace grace, and step into the life God is calling you to. Get Not Finished Yet today at shop.catholic.com or at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
The world has a lot of questions about Catholicism. It's a big faith, and it deserves a big book of answers. Well, now it has two. Get the Big Book of Catholic Answers, Volume 2, and have 300 clear, reliable Catholic answers right at your fingertips whenever something comes up at work, with friends, or around the dinner table. Order your copy of the Big Book of Catholic Answers, Volume 2 at shop.catholic.com, or pick one up at your favorite Catholic bookstore. Welcome back. Catholic Answers Live, summertime, groovy music. Jimmy Akin doesn't get much better than this. Also, the phone line's full. So.
Not summertime yet, technically.
Oh, that's right. It just feels like summertime. You're right. It's not, is it?
Got 2 more days.
Well, I apologize. I apologize to all the weathermen out there for jumping the gun.
Actually.
Yeah, that's right. On the phone, Ryan in Glen Rose, Texas, with a question about, okay, you might have an alleged apparition like Medjugorje, and what's the status of that as far as could you have a personal belief in it, even if it's not approved by the Vatican? And Jimmy, you were addressing that.
Yeah. Now, one of the things that the new norms don't do, unless the Pope specially authorizes this, is they don't engage the question of is an apparition supernatural or not. You know, instead, they're focused on can you have a healthy devotion to this? And so now the prior judgments of apparitions that received supernatural verdicts prior to the new norms, those have not been upset. It's just going forward, they're not going to rule on the question of is something supernatural unless the Pope specifically authorizes an investigation into that. Instead, the question is focused on can you have a healthy devotion to this? And there are 6, not counting supernatural, which is a 7th. There are 6 typical judgments that may be authorized. And they have different levels of confidence and different qualifications about can you have a healthy devotion to this. When it comes to Medjugorje, which Ryan asked about, they specifically had a document on that came out, after they passed the new norms, and it deals specifically with Medjugorje. It does not, because of the new norms, it does not engage the question of is Medjugorje supernatural in origin or not. Instead, it focuses on, well, can you have a healthy devotion to Medjugorje? And the basic answer they gave is yes, provided you make certain qualifications. There are some, provided you keep the focus on the right things, and provided that you don't commit certain errors, and provided that you interpret some of the statements correctly and don't give too much weight to other statements. And if you want a thorough discussion of all that, Ryan, I did 3 episodes. It's only the second time in history I've done 3 episodes on something, but I did 3 episodes of Mysterious World about the church's ruling on Medjugorje. It's episodes 337, 338, and 339. So you can go to mysterious.fm/337, mysterious.fm/338, and mysterious.fm/339. And in particular, you want to listen to that 3rd episode. That's where I really get into the verdict and what I'd have to say about it. And so that's mysterious.fm/339.
Thanks, Ryan. Always great when you call. We're heading up to Canada now. Colin is in Newfoundland, Canada, listening on our website, Catholic.com. Colin, welcome. You got a question for Jimmy?
Yep. Hi, Jimmy. Hi, Si.
Hi, Colin. Hey, Colin, when you get done with your question for Jimmy, can I ask you a question? I have a question about Newfoundland.
Sure.
Okay,
yeah.
Thank you.
Does it have to do with the way it's spelled, Si?
No, it does
Okay.
not. It's something else that. No, thank you very much, though. You've been picking on our call screener. Go ahead, Colin.
No. The call screener got it right. It's spelled Newfound Land, but it's pronounced Newfoundland, even though it's not located in Scandinavia.
Yeah. But that is not the question, Colin, just so you know. That's not what I'm coming with. Go ahead with your question, Colin.
Okay. My understanding is that the church teaches that God gives everyone sufficient grace for salvation and that no one is lost because God failed to provide the grace that they needed. My question is, does Catholic teaching allow us to say to any person at any time that God is presently offering them the grace that's necessary for salvation? Or is church teaching more limited in that it only affirms that God at some point in their life, at least at one point, provides sufficient grace for that person to be saved?
Well, the answer to your question is going to depend on, among other things, what you mean by allow. So what the church has held, and this is, something that's articulated in the Second Vatican Council document, Gaudium et Spes, that God makes salvation possible for everybody. And you can infer from that that he gives everybody sufficient grace to be saved, at least at some point in their life. Whether that grace is available to them at every point in their life is another question. And the church doesn't have a teaching on that. So what we can say with confidence is they will at some point have sufficient grace to be saved, but whether or not they have that grace at every point during their life, that's something that the church does not have a settled teaching on. So that's a matter of opinion. And that leads to the other sense in which the term allow can be used of, could you hold the opinion that they have this grace at every moment in life? And the answer is sure, you could hold that opinion. Church hadn't taught it, but it hadn't prohibited it either. So that's a legitimate opinion one can hold. Also, I'd point out that we don't have any way of detecting sufficient grace. It's not an empirical concept that we can measure with a spectroscope or anything like that. So we can't tell when God has given a person sufficient grace and when he's not. And so we could presume that, let's say a person's being evangelized, that God might give him sufficient grace at that point. But since we can't verify one way or another whether they have sufficient grace at this moment, exhorting people to act on God's grace is a good thing to do at any moment, because we can't tell, oh, now is the right time for them to act, or now is not the right time for them to act. And Scripture uses this modal language. In more than one place it says, if today you hear his voice, harden not your heart. So if you're talking to someone and they're feeling an inclination, they're open to considering the Christian message and to embrace it. Well, if they're feeling that as an option for them right now, well, then act on it, and you can encourage them to act on it. Whether you would want to tell them, and you can do that at any moment, well, that's true in the sense of, if you turn to God at any moment, that he'll accept you. That's true. But if you mean you definitely have the grace to turn to God at any moment, that's a separate question, and it's one that I would feel more hesitant. In fact, frankly, I don't know why I would get into a conversation with a non-Christian person about, do you have sufficient grace at every moment? Because that's such an abstract question. It's not the primary message I'd be going to a non-Christian person with. But if they asked me, do I have sufficient grace at every moment of my life, I'd have to say, I don't know. Church doesn't have a teaching here. The Bible doesn't clearly address it. So I can't say. But if you feel an openness towards considering the Christian message, you ought to act on that.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. My one concern would be, I could imagine some of the scrupulous among us could be worried about sort of like, God offered me the grace that was sufficient when I was 10 years old, say, and hasn't since then. So like for the rest of my life after that, I've missed the boat, so to say. Okay.
Well, you've changed the conditions now. We're not talking about a non-Christian. We're talking about someone who has absorbed enough of the Christian worldview to be scrupulous about this. And there is another, at minimum, it's common opinion, but it's that if you have ever become a Christian, God will give you the grace needed to recover the state of grace. And there's that sometimes grounded in the biblical verse, I will never leave you nor forsake you. Actually, I don't know that I would apply that verse in that way, but the idea of, oh, I missed my one chance, that is not something that is held out to us in Scripture. And we know that if you respond to God now, he will accept you. So don't worry about the past. Accept God now, and he will accept you. So don't get tangled up in debates about how God's grace comes to us, and did I miss it or did I not miss it? It's like, God didn't give us the answers to those questions, so we don't need to be asking them. That's not what's important for our personal salvation. What's important for our personal salvation is, what am I doing now? And we already have practical guidance on that. Make an act of perfect contrition, go to confession if you need to, whatever. But just do whatever you need to, and you'll be fine. And don't worry about invisible things we have no way of verifying about it anyway in our life. So just do what you need to now, and don't be scrupulous.
Can I ask you my question now, Colin?
Sure. What do you want to know about Newfoundland?
I have heard a rumor that your clocks are off by a half hour to the rest of the planet Earth. Is that true?
Yeah, that's
Not
true.
the
'Cause
entire.
we're kind of out in the middle of the Atlantic.
So you guys are like you're a half hour different than the two time zones on either side of you. Is that?
I'd be
Yeah,
careful.
yeah. As Jimmy, I think was
I'd be careful,
we're not
Si,
from the
about.
rest of the world, but yeah.
Yeah, there's other locations that may have that too.
Oh yeah, yeah. That is a fascinating thing, though. It's unusual to say the least. But thank you for letting me ask you that, Colin. I appreciate it, and thanks for the call.
Thank you.
All right, we will take a quick break. It's here and almost everywhere else in North America. We're coming up on the top of the hour. Not in Newfoundland, though. All right, right back with more.
Well, in 19 minutes.
Yeah, but they're past the top of the hour in Newfoundland. They already went past it because they're a half hour off. And apparently this is a point of pride with the people of Newfoundland. Right back with Jimmy Akin, Catholic Answers Live.
This is Archbishop Paul Coakley, the Archdiocese of Oklahoma City, and you're listening to Catholic Answers Live.
Who was the first Catholic in your family? Were they evangelized by a friend, a coworker, a stranger? Did you ever think that you could be that person that God uses to save a soul? And that soul could save their family, their grandchildren, and generations to come. At St. Paul Street Evangelization, a Catholic nonprofit, we train, equip, and mobilize Catholic disciples to do the urgent work of evangelization. Catholic Answers is supported in part by St. Paul Street Evangelization, streetevangelization.com.
Hi, this is Father Mike Schmitz. I invite you to listen to Bible in a Year and Catechism in a Year here on EWTN Radio. On Catechism in a Year, you'll encounter God's plan of sheer goodness for us. Throughout the year, we read through the Catechism of the Catholic Church with direct quotes, plus time for explanations and reflections. I hope you can join us every day, or as often as you can.
Bible in a Year and Catechism in a Year with Father Mike Schmitz, tonight at 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific on EWTN Radio.
Welcome back, Catholic Answers Live. I believe I owe the entire country of India an apology. I didn't know India is also a half hour off of the standard time of the
and they're the most populous country in the world now. They outrank China, so you really got some apologizing ahead of you.
Boy, I do really. I'm not going to go to each individual. I hope the whole country will take mine. But so Newfoundland is in sync with India, Sri Lanka, Iran, Afghanistan, Myanmar, and various other places, including parts of Australia. I didn't know that. But India is big, man. I probably should have known that. Not off by. I should say off, like they're doing it wrong. Shifted by a half hour from the universal system. All right, back to the phones we go. Steve's in Massachusetts watching on YouTube. Hi, Steve. You got a question for Jimmy?
I do, and you may have covered this before, and I missed it.
Okay.
I've covered almost everything before.
Okay, well, maybe I missed it. But there's a lot of controversy going on in the Catholic world about 3 days of darkness. Some priests are saying it's a lot of baloney, and others are preaching just the opposite. What's your opinion, please?
Well, okay, so for folks who may not be aware, the idea is that at some point in the future, there's going to be a time period of 3 days where effectively, I can't say the sun shuts down, but at least no sunlight is making it through to Earth. And according to many folks, the electric light won't work either. And the only thing, according to some people, that will work are blessed beeswax candles. And this idea has been promoted by various, I guess I can say it this way, by two different groups. One group is various reported visionaries who will say they were told something like this in visions. And then it's been further elaborated by devotees of these visionaries, because that's one of the things that tends to happen is a visionary may say something and then their followers, their fans, may push it a little further and make claims that the visionary themselves did not make. Well, okay, first thing, there's no church teaching on this. This is entirely a matter of opinion. And since you've asked for my opinion, Steve, I'll be happy to share it with you. I have looked into some of the sources that pertain to this, and there are several things I would note. One of them is the idea that this is even a literal darkness is not guaranteed. I've found sources going back almost 100 years that that talk about the possibility this may not be physical darkness. This may be some kind of spiritual darkness. Also, some of the sources that this is attributed to are erroneous. For example, it's commonly said that Padre Pio talked about this idea, and in fact he didn't. And we have confirmation from his order that, this is not in his writings. Then there's the fact there's just no basis for this in Scripture. It's entirely based on apparitions that people have claimed to have received, and none of those apparitions have been approved by the church. And so given the magnitude of 3 literal days of darkness and what that would involve, especially the more elaborated versions about only blessed beeswax candles work, but even just there's going to be 3 days of literal darkness affecting the whole planet at once. I'm very suspicious of that. So I don't place high credence in this view. I don't dismiss it. I'm happy to consider evidence for it. I just don't think the evidence for it's very good.
All right, that's been helpful. Thank you.
Very good. Yeah. Thank you. I'll tell you what, I've been meaning to do, but I keep forgetting to give out Jimmy's new book, Evidence for Christ, How We Know That Jesus is the Messiah, available now. So, Steve, if you'll give us an address there in Massachusetts, we'll send you a copy if you'd like a copy. Let's see. I got plenty of time to go on. Let's go to Northampton, Pennsylvania, where Anthony is listening on the Catholic Answers app. Anthony, thanks for downloading the app onto your phone. Go ahead with your question.
Okay, so this is coming from the liberal Christian community, and it's coming from a lady that claims to have training in apologetics. And she used to be part of like a conservative Christian church. So she's saying that she's trying to debunk the concept of life beginning at conception. And her claims are, she used some big words that I'm going to try to pronounce. Her claims are that the concept of life beginning at conception comes from Epicurean and Pythagorean philosophers from ancient Greece that predated Christ, and therefore it's not a biblical thing. So she's trying to use it to saying it's not in the Bible, and she's trying to affirm, like that's her stance for pro-choice, saying abortion is okay, about life beginning at conception. I don't know if that makes sense or not. But.
Yeah, I couldn't quite hear the terms you used. I suspect one of the terms may have been Epicurean, but we can.
Yeah.
And maybe Pythagorean.
That could be. I didn't hear the other one too clearly, but we can set that matter aside. Okay, so the first thing is, well, it's true that Greek philosophers did have a recognition that the unborn child is alive and human from the time of conception. But what they didn't have a clear idea of was when conception occurs. Today, we understand, based on improved scientific knowledge, that that conception occurs almost instantaneously and very quickly after fertilization. So the male inseminates the female, and then when the two gametes come together, just bam, almost instantly, you have conception occur. This was not understood in the ancient world. It was commonly thought that conception was a process that took a few days or weeks, I should say, to complete. In Aristotle's case, he thought that conception for males took about 40 days, and conception for females took about 80 or 90 days. So that's considerably later than what we would understand. But that's basically, a common view in Greek thought. Well, what about biblical thought? That was the other thing this person reportedly mentioned. Well, the Bible doesn't address the question of exactly when does life begin, but it's made very clear that unborn children are alive. And so, that's not in debate. Like we have, among other things, we've got John the Baptist leaping in Elizabeth's womb, and she's in the 6th month, what we would call the 5th month at that point. And so, so you've got life in the womb before birth. The question would then be, well, if we set aside ancient views, what can we determine now about when human life begins? And the answer is medical. This is a scientific question. This is not a philosophical question. It's not a theological question. It's a scientific question. And we know that human life begins at conception. We know that the unborn are alive from conception because they have metabolism. They're growing and dividing and stuff like that. Dead fetuses don't grow. So the fact that they have metabolism and they're dividing, well, then they're alive, because dead things don't do that. They don't have metabolism and they don't grow. On the other hand, well, then are they human? Yeah, they got a human genetic code. So and it's distinct from the mom's genetic code. So they're their own human organism from conception forward. And so the life of a human individual that's distinct from both the mother and the father begins at conception, and that's just a biological fact. So what I would say is this individual is doing is they're trying to dodge the clear results of science in favor of their agenda by using distractions involving ancient views, whereas we have, and I would say the biblical view is consistent with the modern view. It doesn't address the question fully of when does human life begin, but it is consistent with what science has revealed. So there's nothing about the biblical view that's false. It's just not as specific as we understand now. And now that we do understand the science of when human life begins, we need to act on that basis and treat these distinct human individuals who are still in the womb as the human beings they are. And so I would say that that the individual you're talking about is using what I would call philosophical or theological sophistry to deflect obvious facts that have moral implications that need to be acted upon. And by the way, the sophists were another school of Greek philosophers, and they had a reputation for using shaky, self-serving arguments, and that's what I would say this is.
What do you think?
This person is using a shaky, self-serving argument.
What do you think, Anthony?
Yeah, that makes sense. It's a hard battle to fight sometimes, though.
Yeah, well, Jimmy knows. He's been fighting it for years, for decades, to get people to understand this. I'll tell you what, Anthony, just to say thank you for the call, I would like to give you also, if you'd like, a copy of Jimmy's book, Evidence for Christ. It's his newest book, and I'm enjoying giving it away. How we know that Jesus is the Messiah. That's the new book from Jimmy Akin, Evidence for Christ. All you have to do is hang on the phone for a minute. Edgar will pick up. Give him an address there in Northampton, Pennsylvania, or wherever you want the book sent, and we'll send it to you. We're going to take a very quick break. Lots of folks on the phone, so we got plenty of questions for the next hour, and we've got Jimmy with us for another hour. One or two lines usually open up at this time, so if you'd like to call, go ahead, 888-318-7884. Welcome back, Catholic Answers Live. Jimmy Akin, our guest, the author of many things, including the brand new book, Evidence for Christ, How We Know That Jesus is the Messiah, also the man behind Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World. He told us last hour 422 episodes have now dropped. 400, but that's not how many have been made, that's how many have been dropped. I know that he stays ahead of it, so there's...
Got several recorded that haven't dropped yet.
Really? Do you? How far do you try to stay ahead? Do you do like 5 or 6 or 2?
Well, I'd like to be 8 ahead. I'm not currently 8 ahead, but we're going to get back to 8 ahead very shortly.
You know something I've never asked you about, but so you've done all these hundreds of episodes. Like, are there particular episodes that you could think of where you're like, oh, but new evidence has come to light in that one I did before? I think you did
I've done update episodes before, and where I update, here's what's been discovered since we did it last time.
Yeah. All right, Jimmy Akin, I'm senior apologist here at Catholic Answers, and your help with your questions today. If you've got one, you're welcome to call. Whatever it is, it's Ask Him Anything. 888-318-7884. Thomas in Memphis has been waiting a while, and I thank you so much for waiting, Thomas. Go ahead with your question.
Well, thank you.
I
did have one question. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. You get right up next to that phone and lay it on us. What's your question?
And if you're using speakerphone, take it off speaker.
Could just be the Tennessee phone company.
Is that better?
I don't. Oh my gosh, that's better, Thomas. So much better.
Yeah.
All right.
Pro tip for the audience: when you're calling a radio show, never use speakerphone.
All right, Thomas, we're ready.
Sounds good. All right. So, well, my first question, I didn't run it by the screener, but it's kind of important to me. Sai, have you started watching Fringe yet?
Fringe? Oh, no.
So that's for you, Sai.
I forgot that. Yeah, we had talked about that with Jimmy one day, and Jimmy recommended it, and I have not started watching Fringe. All right, I'm going to send myself an email while you're talking to Jimmy. Thank you for reminding me of that, because that came with a recommendation. Jimmy liked the TV show Fringe, so yeah, I got to catch that.
Very well done. All right, Mr. Akin, my question is, where did the Church Fathers get their physical copies of the Hebrew Scriptures?
Amazon.
But it was literally Amazon
at
the time.
South America?
No, it was where the Amazons lived. I'm sorry. I just shouldn't have gotten involved. Go ahead, Jimmy.
They got their physical copy. Now, when we say Hebrew scriptures, we got to clarify what you mean. Do you mean scriptures that were in the Hebrew language, or just copies of the Jewish scriptures, regardless of what language they were in?
Copies of the Jewish scriptures.
Okay. So the very first Christians were Palestinian Jews, and they spoke Aramaic, and so most of them were not literate. There were a few, though, who were, and they would have had Jewish scriptures that they got in Hebrew that they got from Jewish sources. Just like other Jews who happen to be literate, and Palestinian. They also could have had access to written copies of what are known as the Targumim or Targums, which were Aramaic translations that were often read in the synagogue in Palestine. And so they would have gotten those from Jewish sources as well. When it comes to slightly later Christians, after the church became dominantly Greek-speaking, they used the Septuagint translation in Greek, and no matter which language they were getting it in, they would have gotten it the same way that everybody got books in the ancient world. You borrowed the book from someone who had it, and then you paid a scribe to make a copy for you. And so early Jewish Christians would have gotten their copies of the Jewish scriptures from either Hebrew in Palestine, either in Hebrew or Aramaic from other Jews, and then had them copied. Jews and Gentiles that didn't speak Hebrew or Aramaic would have gotten the Septuagint from presumably initially other Jews that had them, and then they had scribes copy them for them, but it would have been the same process by which you got any book in the ancient world. You borrowed a copy and then had someone who was a professional, usually a professional scribe, not always, but you had someone who functioned as a scribe who made a copy for you.
Okay.
Okay. But yeah, well, I guess my question is, well, you've answered my question very well, but it seems odd that the Jewish authorities who would have, something so, special and expensive would just lend them out to someone from who you could argue would be a competing sect.
Well, by the time that Christianity was viewed as a competing sect, the cat was out of the bag. Christians already had Jewish scriptures. So, initially during the ministry of Christ itself, and for some time thereafterwards, Christianity was viewed as, a Jewish group, and not necessarily a Jewish group in conflict with the authorities. In fact, there were members of the authorities, like the New Testament talks about Pharisees who became members of the Christian sect, and priests who became members of the Christian sect. And, a lot of them would have had copies or access to copies. Local synagogues also wouldn't view Christians necessarily as an opposing sect. And a lot of them would have had, at least Christians who had writings, some of them became, some Jews who already had the writings then became Christian and brought their writings with them. So they had, access to these things.
Well, fantastic.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Thomas. I'll tell you what, you did wait a good while, and I'd love to send you a copy of Jimmy's new book, Evidence for Christ, How We Know That Jesus is the Messiah. It's available anywhere where you get your books, but you're getting it for free if you just give us an address, and we will send it off to you. We'll do a little bit of early break, Johnny Versilla. We'll take a quick break, and then we'll come right back and get lots of calls on for Jimmy Akin. Catholic Answers Live. Jimmy Akin, our guest. Ask him anything. Continues right after this.
Miss a show? Make sure to catch up by downloading the podcast, available online at Catholic.com.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Magnificat. Published monthly, Magnificat features texts of daily Mass, prayers, articles, meditations, art commentaries, and more, in step with the liturgical rhythm of the Church, on the web at Magnificat.com.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects homebuyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
Beyond Damascus with Dan Dematteis and Aaron Richards is our show for young adults.
Everybody's talking about encounter. Everybody's talking about that mountaintop experience. What we fail to often talk about is what happens after, what happens beyond that Damascus moment.
Jesus Christ is calling all of us to be missionary disciples, disciples of Jesus who are on mission to bring the kingdom of God here and now on this earth.
Beyond Damascus with Dan Dematteis and Aaron Richards, tomorrow at 8 Eastern on EWTN Radio.
Welcome back. Catholic Answers Live. Yeah, we talked about the Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World podcast, but we didn't get to the Jimmy Akin podcast. And it is a world of riches when it comes to Jimmy Akin. You get one at the beginning of the week and one at the end of the week. And what dropped on Monday on the Jimmy Akin podcast, Jimmy?
It was episode 88 of the Jimmy Akin podcast, and it's all about what the number of Christ is. People know that the number of the beast is 666, but very few people have, in our world, have stopped to think, well, what would the number of Jesus be? But this is something that people in the ancient world would have thought about. because for them, every letter of the alphabet had a numerical value. So you could look down and see the letters A, B, and C, or you could look down and see the numbers 1, 2, and 3, because their ABCs and their 1, 2, 3s were the same written system.
Mm-hmm.
So any letter that was written down was also a written number. And so ancient Christians did, and we can actually show this from 1st and 2nd century sources, did think about the number of Jesus, and it's a very interesting number.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as you know what the number of Jesus is, it's like, which came first in Christian imagination, the number of the beast or the number of Jesus?
Right. That's
And then
episode 88 available now at
Right.
the Jimmy Akin podcast. Go ahead, Jimmy. I'm sorry.
Coming up this Monday after this weekend, I have an episode where I have an ecumenical dialogue with Austin Suggs of Gospel Simplicity about purgatory and indulgences. And he's coming from a Protestant background. Specifically, he's Anglican, but he's coming from a Protestant background. I'm, of course, Catholic, and we end up agreeing about purgatory and indulgences. So it's a very interesting dialogue.
And that you're saying that will drop on Monday.
On
that one.
This coming Monday.
All right. Check it out wherever you get your podcasts or Jimmy Akin's YouTube channel. All right. Let's see. Where are we going? We're going to Great Falls, Montana. Happy that you're here with us. Stephen from Great Falls, go ahead with your question.
Yeah. Hey, Jimmy. I appreciate you guys taking my call today.
We're happy to.
So I have a little bit of a different question. I have been in a dialogue with someone who is claiming biblical subordinatism. I've never heard of it before. He often refers to himself as holding to the eternal submission of the Son. So he's claiming that Christ is fully divine because he's begotten of the Father, but yet he also says that the Son doesn't possess everything that the Father possesses, like omniscience, and that the divine nature is communicated from the Father by historical begetting. And it seems to me like, because he completely regards the Nicene view of the Trinity as a heresy. So I've been in this debate dialogue with him, and I guess my question is, from our perspective, how can we best defend the Nicene Trinity from someone that is more along the lines of semi-Arianism? Because I've never had to deal with that kind of conversation. My parents are Protestant, so authority topic comes out a lot, but I've never had to try to debate the Trinity before.
Okay, let me ask, does this individual you're having the dialogue with, does he belong to any particular church?
That I don't know. It was actually in a debate group that I'm a part of, and his challenge was that no one could explain the heresy of the Trinity by only using the 66 books of the Protestant Bible. And then by asking questions is when it kind of seemed to lead towards him essentially saying, and I asked him and he never responded. He just kind of walked away from the conversation. The classic question of, are you saying that there was a time where Christ did not exist? And he kind of shrugged his shoulders and walked away.
Okay.
So
The reason I ask,
I've looked online at the website. Yeah.
The reason I ask is I'm trying to understand, in order to help you as much as I can, it would help me to understand where this person is coming from. There are groups, like, for example, the Jehovah's Witnesses, who could make claims similar to this, but it also could be that he's just freewheeling his own theology. So to know whether he's part of a tradition that teaches this, or if this is an idea he's read about or developed on his own, could help me out. But since you don't know, you don't know. So I'll do what I can. The idea, so the first thing to say is, it sounds like the concept he's referring to is subordinationism. In other words, that the Son is subordinate to the Father. And he's objecting to the Trinity, if I heard you right, because it teaches eternal subordination of the Son to the Father, whereas he believes the Son became subordinate at the incarnation. Is that right, or have I misremembered what you said?
No, so he's gone on, and I wrote down like the basic things that he's denied. One is numerical identity, that they share the same divine essence. He denies that. He also has denied that and defined that the Son's divinity is just granted, or rather, quote unquote, communicated by the Father, and distinguishes that he's the source. And then ontologically, he's insisted that the Father and the Son don't possess all the same attributes identically.
Okay, well, it sounds like he's advocating. Well, I'd have to know more about his view in order to put him in a specific category. But the way to argue for the Trinity using the Bible is, and it doesn't matter which canon you're using, whether it's the 66 book Protestant canon or the 73 book Catholic canon or the even bigger Ethiopian canon. What you need to do in order to show that the Trinity is true is show that the Father is God, the Son is God, the Spirit is God. There is only one God, and the Father, the Son, and the Spirit are distinct. And there are passages in Scripture, particularly in the New Testament, that can be used to document each one of those claims. For example, Jesus is called God repeatedly in the New Testament. One example would be in Romans, where Paul says that Christ is God over all. And similarly in other Pauline epistles, it says that he had the very form of God, and he had equality with God. Now, taking those terms at face value, well, okay, equality is equality. Psychelet, if you have two human beings and they're equal, so they have equality, does that mean they have the same attributes?
No.
Like intelligence, will, and
yes, in that
physicality?
Yes. Yeah. Right.
Yeah, okay. So if God the Father has certain attributes like omniscience and omnipotence and things like that, and Jesus had equality with the Father, then Jesus is going to have omniscience and omnipotence and things like that. What your friend is going to have to do to get out of that is then try to carve out unstated exceptions and say, well, it doesn't mean full equality. It means something less than full equality. And it doesn't mean he's fully God. It means he's something less than fully God. But at that point, your friend is not taking the language at face value. And if you're not taking the language at face value, then you need to provide evidence for why it shouldn't be taken at face value. You also are going to need to explain the problem that Jesus said he was going to guide his church, including in its teaching ministry, until the end of the world. He says that in Matthew 28. He says, go among the nations, teaching them whatever I've commanded you, and I'll be with you until the end of the age. So Jesus indicated he was going to be guiding his church, including in its teaching. And in John's gospel, particularly in John 16, he talks about how the Holy Spirit is going to lead the disciples into all truth. And he talks in Matthew 16 about how the gates of hell will not prevail against his church, which means his church is never going to die. And since his church embraced the Trinity, and there are no surviving non-Trinitarian sects from, the early days of Christianity, then his church would have died. and it would not have been guided to the end of the world by Jesus and the Holy Spirit. So in addition to the exegetical problems in trying to get around the plain language of Scripture, he's also got an ecclesiological problem of how do you get around the promises that Jesus made about his church if you want to advocate this theory. So that would kind of sketch what I'd have to say in response to him. But like I said, I'd need to know more about exactly where he's coming from in order to tailor the argument more specifically.
So we will leave that there. Stephen, thank you very much for the call. Off to back to Tennessee. We've been to Tennessee a couple times a day. Andrew is in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, watching on YouTube. Andrew, welcome. Go ahead with your question.
Hello, Jimmy. Hello, Cy. How you guys doing today?
Very well, Andrew. Thank you.
I'm doing okay.
Okay, great. Well, I'll go ahead and get to my question. So it's about the Ghostbusters. I know.
Finally,
I know, Jimmy.
Finally, a Ghostbusters question. It's almost we're almost through the whole show. All right, go ahead, Andrew.
Okay, yeah. So I know, Jimmy, you make an important distinction between ghosts and demons. And I believe some of the creatures they fought in the movies are actually demons. So my question is, are the Ghostbusters good, and would they need ecclesiastical permission to do what they do because they're dealing with departed human spirits and, in some cases, demons?
Okay. So in regard to the first question, are they good in the movies? In the movie, well, yeah, they're good guys. They're the protagonists of the movie. They're trying to help people. They're trying to prevent people from being harassed and attacked by spirits, whether they're human or non-human spirits. And so, yeah, they're good guys. In terms of would they need ecclesiastical permission to do what they do? Well, it depends on what you're talking about. The church has no regulation. Now, you mentioned a distinction between human spirits and demonic spirits, and the way that term is if used in official context today, it refers to a fallen angel, which is not a human. It's been used other ways in other periods of history, but today it means a non-human spirit. Well, the church doesn't have any regulations on what to do regarding how to alleviate harassment from human spirits. So, trapping them in an electronic device is something that doesn't work in the real world, but it works in the fictional world of the movies, and the church doesn't have any regulations saying you can't do that. So they wouldn't need permission to do that unless there are different ecclesiastical rules in the fictional universe than there are in the real one. When it comes to demons, in the real world, it's required that if you want to do a major exorcism, that you have to be, in the Catholic Church, you have to be a priest who's been specially commissioned by a bishop to do that. And so if we assume the same rules are operating in the world of Ghostbusters that operate in our world, well, then the Ghostbusters would need to be priests, and they need permission from the local bishop to be able to do a major exorcism, but they don't do major exorcisms in the movie. I don't recall them doing any kind of exorcism, although it's been a long time since I've seen it, so I can't say for sure. But unless you're doing a major exorcism, there's actually great liberty. People who are not priests with special permission from the bishop can do minor exorcisms. They can do deliverance prayers, and if they can do those, then they could also trap a demon in an electronic device, which also doesn't work in the real world, but apparently does work in the world of Ghostbusters. And certainly if a demon like Gozer the Gozerian shows up and is threatening New York City, then you've got a necessity defense too, of we've got to save all this human life and we got to do it right quick, so we better summon the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. and hope that works, or we better cross these streams and make sure that we get rid of this horrible supernatural threat. We ain't got time to get permission from the local bishop. Necessity requires that we take action now. So they'd also have a necessity defense.
Okay, Andrew?
Yeah, I mean, you kind of, on the nitty-gritty details, you kind of fumbled it a little bit, because the demon god took the form of the Marshmallow Man, and they were fighting the Marshmallow Man in the movie.
But that's not why Dan Aykroyd's character summoned the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. It wasn't a fumble. It was a joke.
Andrew, hang on. We'll send you Evidence for Christ, Jimmy's new book. I got to take a quick break. Right back with more Jimmy Akin. Who was Jesus? It's the most important question in the world. Was he a great teacher, a religious myth, the Messiah and Lord? In Evidence for Christ, apologist Jimmy Akin builds a powerful, step-by-step case from history, scripture, and reason, showing that Jesus is the fulfillment of prophecy and the risen Lord. Get your copy of Jimmy Akin's Evidence for Christ today at shop.catholic.com or at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
The world has a lot of questions about Catholicism. It's a big faith, and it deserves a big book of answers. Well, now it has two. Get the Big Book of Catholic Answers, Volume 2, and have 300 clear, reliable Catholic answers right at your fingertips, whenever something comes up at work, with friends, or around the dinner table. Order your copy of the Big Book of Catholic Answers, Volume 2 at shop.catholic.com, or ask for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Have you ever wondered about the mysterious, even obscure aspects of the Catholic faith? Dive into the Jimmy Akin podcast, where Jimmy brings together information from many fields as he pushes the boundaries of apologetics. Tune in today to the Jimmy Akin podcast, Mysteries of the Faith, a highly entertaining, informative, and at times humorous show that will help you grow in your faith. Visit JimmyAkinPodcast.com today to subscribe.
Why do we baptize? Does it really do anything? In Baptism Now Saves You, Dr. Carlo Broussard explains the unbreakable relationship between baptism and salvation, making sense of the Church's teachings in a way that is easy to understand and ready to share. St. Peter said, "Repent and be baptized, every one of you." Discover what that means today. Order your copy of Baptism Now Saves You at shop.catholic.com or ask for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Welcome back. Catholic Answers Live. Johnny Versillo spinning the records in there. Thank you, Johnny, for the groovy music. Jimmy Akin, our guest, phone number 888-318.
Records, how old school.
Yeah, it is. Johnny's 18. He's probably going to have to go look that up. What does that mean, spinning records? I have no idea. Look it up on the internets there, Johnny. Not while we're doing the show. 888-318-7884, the number. Off to Pleasant Grove, Utah we go, where Ryder is watching on YouTube. Ryder, welcome. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Hi, I recently watched the film Silence by Martin Scorsese, and in this film, the main character is a Jesuit priest, and he has to, or at least in this scenario, he has to lie and denounce Christ in order to save a group of Japanese Christians. Ooh. So from a Catholic perspective, is it ever okay to lie or to denounce Christ if it's to save somebody's life?
Okay, so there is no single answer to the question of is it okay to lie. There are different opinions on this. According to a prominent strand in Catholic theological history, it is never okay to lie. This view was advocated, for example, by St. Augustine and St. Thomas Aquinas. So it's got some quite respectable advocates who favor it. On the other hand, it is by no means universal. There's also a view which has been held, including by some very recent popes, that acknowledges it is sometimes legitimate to lie in order to achieve goals like saving human life. And then they have different theories of how do you account for that. So, for example, Pius XII during World War II, authorized the fabrication of false baptismal certificates so Jews could pass as Christians to escape Nazi and Italian persecution. And during the authoritarian regime in Argentina, Pope Francis, before he was Pope, told lies in order to similarly save people from government oppression. So there is this alternative view. Then you've got a question of how do you account for it. And one proposal that's been made is you're only obligated to tell the truth if the person you're talking to has a right to the truth. So if they don't have a right to the truth and you've got a compelling reason why you need to lie to them, it would be okay to lie to them. Or, depending on how you define lying, you can tell a falsehood to them, expecting them to believe the falsehood, but it wouldn't technically be lying because they had no right to this information. That's essentially a semantic question. My own theory is that lying is a form of damage that you do to another person. To you give a fancy philosophical term to it, it's a form of what you could call doxastic damage. Doxa means belief, and so it's a form of damage to someone's belief system. And so if you lie to someone, if you feed them false information that they knowing that they're going to believe it or hoping that they're going to believe it, what you're trying to do is damage their belief system. And so I would argue, this is just my personal view, but I would argue that there are situations where you can damage a person's belief system in order to save human life, just like there are situations where you can damage a person's body in order to save human life. If the Nazis come to my door and want to know, do I have any Jews there, and there's no way I can get out of it without lying, or attacking the Nazis physically. Well, if I could attack them, if I could kill the Nazi and damage his body that profoundly, I would say damaging his belief system to where he just believes there are no Jews in my attic is a less serious form of damage than killing him. So I would say I could lie to him in order to save the lives. Although, again, you could quibble about should we call it lying at that point. However, I would say there are some, in my view, there are some lies that can never be told, just like there are some occasions where killing can never be done. You can kill an aggressor, but you cannot kill an innocent person. And in the same way, you can damage people's belief system about a lot of things, but one of the things you can't do is denounce Christ, because it fundamentally misrepresents God and man, and specifically the relationship between you and God. And Jesus has made it clear, and the New Testament makes it clear, if we deny him before men, he will deny us before his Father. And that makes it sound like it's a mortal sin to deny the Christian faith. So I haven't seen this movie. I don't know what the circumstances were. I would say my personal opinion is that there are situations that could justify lying, but I would not be comfortable saying that there are situations that would justify denying Christ, even when human life is at stake. Christians are called upon to be willing to be martyred themselves. And I would say, on my view, that we have to be willing to let other people be martyred too, rather than deny Christ.
What do you think, Ryder?
Thank you. That makes sense.
All right. I have not seen the movie, but I heard it's a pretty rough movie.
Yeah, it is.
Pretty brutal.
It's about, the Christians are dying in Japan, and he has to denounce Christ to save them. So you answered my question perfectly. Thanks.
Wonderful. You want? You can. I won't ask you if you want it. I'll tell you. You can have it. Evidence for Christ. How we know that Jesus is the Messiah. The new book from Jimmy Akin. If you hang on and give us an address there in Pleasant Grove, Utah, we will send it off to you. Allison's next in Midland, Texas. Glad you waited, Allison. Thanks for doing so. Go ahead with your question.
Yes, hi. So my question is, when did it first start in church history that popes, monks, and nuns started taking on a religious name that was different from their birth name?
Well, it was different depending on what group you're talking about. If you're talking about like monks and nuns, people in religious life, then it began between the 300s and the 500s. So you could say the 400s plus or minus a century. When it comes, but it's hard to date precisely because it wasn't universal. It's not like there was a ruling and okay, starting tomorrow we're all going to have new names. It was a practice that was adopted here and there, and it took a while to become standard. When it came to popes, that's easy to date. The year that happened was AD 533, and the first pope to take a new name was John II. And we even know why. It's because his birth name was Mercurius, and Mercury was a Roman god. And so Mercurius, when he was elected as pope, didn't want a pope to have the name of a pagan god, so he adopted the name John, and he was the second person to have that name as pope, so he became known as John II. Even then, it didn't become common. That was kind of a one-off. Now, actually, I should mention not everybody had Mercurius's opinion on this matter. There was a previous pope named Dionysius, and Dionysius is also a pagan god's name, and he didn't have a problem, just like there's the evangelist in the New Testament, Apollos, who's named after Apollo. Well, he didn't feel the need to change his name as a Christian evangelist, and Pope Dionysius didn't feel the need to change his name, but Mercurius did choose to. But that was kind of a one-off, and it really didn't become common for popes to take new names until about it was right before the year 1000. And then as soon as it started around the year 1000, that's when it really locked in. And basically almost every pope since then has taken a different name upon becoming pope.
Okay. Allison, that makes sense to you?
That's fascinating. It just, I never knew too much about, why, people would end up
changing those names.
Choosing, yeah.
Well, basically, it's a symbol of your new life in God. So, like in a monastic context, you're kind of saying goodbye to your old unconsecrated life by taking on a new name that symbolizes your consecration to God as a religious person. And you could read the papal custom similarly, although it's not as fleshed out. And I suspect it was also influenced because you notice how it catches on all of a sudden around the year 1000. Well, by that point, you had lots of Christian monarchs in Europe, and monarchs frequently take new names when they become the reigning monarch. And I suspect that royal custom may have had an influence on why it caught on with popes in the Middle Ages, but I haven't researched that question, so I don't know that.
Allison, very grateful for the call. Thanks for waiting. I know you did. I'll send you a copy, if you'd like, of Jimmy's new book, Evidence for Christ, How We Know That Jesus is the Messiah. Give us. Darren will pick up in a sec. Give us that address and we'll send it off to you. We're going to take a very quick break. There's a couple lines open. If you've got a question for Jimmy, we'll do our very best to get you on with him. 888-318-7884.
There's only one Catholic Answers Live.
The Catechism defines evangelization as the proclamation of Christ and his gospel by word and the testimony of life. But what does that look like in real life? It looks like St. Paul street evangelists out in the public square sharing the good news. We're a Catholic nonprofit that starts conversations by handing out free sacramentals. Then we employ our method of listen, befriend, proclaim, and invite. Catholic Answers is supported in part by St. Paul Street Evangelization. Visit streetevangelization.com to learn more. Alexian Brothers is a proud sponsor of Catholic Answers Live. For 800 years, these Catholic brothers have offered a prophetic and daring response to the gospel, serving Christ in the sick, the poor, and the dying. Is God calling you to be a courageous disciple? If you feel called to total self-giving as a religious brother in the mission of Jesus, call our vocations office at 847-264-8703. That's 847-264-8703. AlexianBrothers.org.
EWTN, teaching the truth.
I love listening to EWTN. I feel like that's one of the sprinkles also that help keep the Catholic faith alive. I want to say I'm very thankful for the explosion in Catholic media in the past 20 years. Catholic radio all over the country, incredible grace in my life and helped me in my reversion.
Hi, thank you. I'm a first-time caller. I really love your show and your passion for God's people, so thank you for that.
It can't be. It's this late in the show. I'm looking at the clock here. Man, it flew. It flew. Lots of great questions today. Jimmy Akin, our guest. More questions welcome. We'll try our best because we do have a bit of time before the end of the hour. 888-318-7884. Ask him anything. And off we go to Lowville, New York. Jeffy in Lowville. Thanks very much for the call, Jeffy. Welcome.
Thanks a lot. Basically, I was curious because it seems that Romans 4 conflicts Catholicism quite a bit.
Okay, why would you say that? By the way, are you using a speakerphone? Because you're kind of breaking up.
Yeah, we are.
Yeah, please take your phone off speaker.
Okay.
And then, Jeffy, what about Romans 4 would seem to contradict Catholicism to you?
It teaches faith alone, but...
Mm-hmm.
And so, and in Catholicism, you also...
Does it?
Next to faith, you also need baptism.
Go ahead.
And the Eucharist. And
Okay.
also works, too. Because the Bible also says that faith without works is dead.
Okay. So you've raised about 4 issues there. Let's go through them one at a time. The first thing you said was Romans 4:5 teaches faith alone. So let's read what Romans 4:5 actually says. Romans 4:5 says, but to the one who does not work, but who believes in the one who justifies the ungodly, his faith is credited for righteousness. Okay, now the translation you've read from Jeffrey may be a little different, but it communicates the same basic content. You said that this passage teaches faith alone. Where is the word faith mentioned in that verse?
It's not just that specific verse. I was talking about the whole chapter. I think you misheard me.
Oh, well, maybe I did. In any event, Romans 4:5 does not teach faith alone because it doesn't mention faith alone. And in fact, Romans does not teach faith alone. You know how I know that? Because Romans and every other book of the New Testament except the book of James does not use the formula faith alone. That phrase occurs once in the New Testament, and it's in James chapter 2, where it's rejected as a description of how we're saved. You have other passages that say things like man is saved by faith and not by works of the law, but it doesn't say faith alone. And so that's reading into the text. That's a practice known as eisegesis. That means reading into the text. And it's not the way we're supposed to handle the Bible. We're not supposed to read into the text. We're supposed to read the meaning that is in the text out of it. That's called exegesis. Now, so Romans, whether you construe it narrowly as Romans 4:5 or more broadly as the whole book of Romans, it never teaches faith alone. You do have statements like, and this is paralleled in Galatians, about man is justified by faith and not by works of the law, but it never says faith alone. So that's just not taught in Romans. Now, let's suppose it was. You said that conflicted with Catholicism. The idea of faith alone, right? You said that, Jeffy? Want to make sure I understood you. Okay. Yeah. Well, I've got some news for you. That is not a problem for the Catholic Church, because the Catholic Church doesn't have a problem with the idea of justification by faith alone. In fact, Pope Benedict XVI, back in the year 2008, gave a speech in which he commented on the fact that Martin Luther's formula, faith alone, is true as long as you mean the right kind of faith. So there's different understandings of what faith is, and as long as you understand faith correctly, the Catholic Church doesn't have a problem with the idea of justification by faith alone. Popes themselves, like Pope Benedict, have said that. And Catholics in history have used the formula faith alone. The idea that Catholics do have a problem with this is a mistake. And it's a mistake that's particularly common in the Protestant community, although it's also a mistake that's made by some Catholics, but it's actually not true. The Church never condemns the formula faith alone. What did happen about 500 years ago was a church council, the Council of Trent, condemned one understanding of that formula. But if you read what they said carefully, it's very clear they're only condemning one understanding. So even if Romans did teach faith alone, the Catholic Church wouldn't be contradicted by that. The Catholic Church has no problem with that formula as long as you understand it correctly. So that's one of the issues you raised. You also raised baptism in the Eucharist and works. Okay, well, let's do those quickly because we're getting close to the end of the hour. Okay, the Eucharist. The key question, actually, I need to bracket all three of those with, is the question, does it happen before or after you enter a state of justification? Like, do you have to do good works to get into a state of justification, or do good works flow from a state of justification? Well, the Catholic Church actually teaches now there's 2 points to make. The first one is Paul is not talking about good works in Romans, not in this passage. He's talking about overwhelmingly works of the Mosaic law. That's why he keeps referring to circumcision. Circumcision is not a good work, but it's not a work of moral value. It's a work that is done to obey the Mosaic law. And that's why Paul keeps talking about the circumcised and the uncircumcised. But even if you were to grant the idea that he's talking about morally good works here, the Catholic Church doesn't teach that you need to do good works in order to get into a state of justification. In fact, it understands that you can't do good works to get into a state of justification. In fact, the Council of Trent, that council I mentioned before, says nothing that precedes justification, whether faith or works, merits the grace of justification. So on the Catholic view, good works are something that flows from the state of justification. They don't get you into it. And that's actually agreed upon by people in the Protestant community. You don't do good works to get into justification, but as Paul says in Ephesians, God created us in Christ so that we would do good works. So they flow from our justification as Christians. So once again, what Romans says doesn't conflict with what the Catholic Church teaches. Then there's the Eucharist. But do you have to receive the Eucharist? Cy Kellett, you can help me out here. Do you have to do the Eucharist? Do you have to receive the Eucharist to get into a state of justification?
No.
No. So it's not a good work that precedes justification. It's something you do after justification. So again, there's no contradiction with the Catholic Church here. Then, Jeffy, you mentioned baptism. And baptism is something you do in order to be justified, at least in the ordinary course of affairs. But is baptism a work that earns anything with God, or is it a gift that God gives us? Cy Kellett, why don't you tell me, if I get baptized, am I doing anything that God owes me for there?
I was 8 days old when it happened to me, Jimmy. I was definitely not a work that I was owed anything for.
Yeah, so it's not a work that earns anything. And you know who else agreed with that was Martin Luther. And so when you've got clear passages like 1 Peter 3:21 saying baptism now saves you, it's not a work. It doesn't earn anything. It's just doing what God says to do, and that doesn't mean you're earning anything. So in none of these passages, and Martin Luther and other Protestants would agree with this, in none of these respects does Romans 4:5 or the whole of Romans contradict Catholic teaching. What would you have to say about that, Jeffy?
I'd say that helped a lot, actually. Yeah, that helps my understanding.
Wonderful. Good. Also, now I think Cy's going to give you a book here, but I want to give you one too. I did a little short book called 20 Answers, Faith and Works, and I'd like to offer you that as well. It sounds like you're a young gentleman, so you may need to get permission from an adult to give your address, or they can give your address, but we'd be happy to send you both 20 Answers, Faith and Works, and my new book, Evidence for Christ.
Jeffy, I'm going to go quickly just to get another caller on, but thank you. And hang on, give us an address if you can, and we will send those off to you. Sean's right here in San Diego watching on YouTube. Sean, as you can hear, we got to go quickly. Can you?
Yes, super quick.
Yep.
Hey, Jimmy. Just curious what your thoughts are. Can you hear
Yes,
me?
yes. Go ahead.
Yeah, just curious what your thoughts are on simulation theory, and if the church has any teachings or guidance on it, and then your personal opinions on it.
Well, the church has no teachings or guidance about simulation theory, so it's all a matter of opinion. What simulation theory, and I'll tell you mine. By the way, if we get cut off, I have dealt with this on Mysterious World before in episode 17. So if you go to mysterious.fm/17, you can listen to a whole episode about this. Having said that, what simulation theory essentially proposes is what the stuff of the universe is made out of, at least the physical universe, because that's all it can deal with. But the Catholic Church has no teaching on what the stuff of the universe or the physical universe is made of. I mean, it's conventionally called matter, but there are different theories about what matter is. And there have been different theories that have been in vogue at different times in Christian history. In the ancient world, a very popular theory borrowed from Greek philosophy was that it's the four elements: air, earth, fire, and water. These days, we have a refined version of the atomic theory of matter. What the simulation hypothesis proposes, it's essentially patterns of energy running on a server somewhere, but none of those theories are impossible. I think we have good evidence for the atomic theory of matter. I don't think we have good evidence for simulation theory, but even if it were true, so what? We've still got immortal souls. even if they're clothed in patterns of energy running on a server somewhere. But check out episode 17 of Mysterious World.
And thank you for being quick, Sean, to say thank you. I'd like to send you a copy of Jimmy's book, Evidence for Christ, How We Know That Jesus is the Messiah. Just hang on and give us an address. That'll do it for us. We'll see you next time, God willing, right here on Catholic Answers Live.